David Tulis.
The City Council yesterday in Chattanooga decided to do nothing to overturn an agreement that the city has with Outsourced Staffing, a small business run by Rusty Hall. It's a staffing company, about half of whose business comes from the city government providing anywhere from 75 to 100 people to fill temporarily slots left open by departures and by vacation needs of the city government workforce. The competitor for that business is by MSI, run by Donna Christian Lowe and her husband. And this couple has been in the press seeking to get this part of this work. It's a contract of about $1.8 million, and most of which goes, of course, to the hiring of people and to wages and taxes and ancillary costs connected with the regulated activity of employment, with some left over, of course, for administration and then some for profit from that amount. The city purchasing office had taken steps that seem to have attempted to undo or break the agreement, which is, of course, a contract, which can't be easily overturned. I mean, contracts, after all, are enforceable, and yet there was a move by the city purchasing department to redo it for a 6-month term and then redo it for a 3-month term. And Rusty Hall's insisting, saying, "Well, you can't do that. There's not a cause for this. You can't just rescind it for no reason." And I'm not really ready to agree to just undoing the agreement like that. I don't agree to undo it and hold on. And so the city council, hearing the story about the Lowe's, there's some concern expressed among members about their personal business dealings, though Donna Christian Lowe has been in that field for some time. The council did not do anything in the favor of the challenger, MSI, the incumbent being Outsourced Staffing. And it was a story that broke about the Lowe's on Chattanoogan.com. John Wilson gave himself a byline for that story last week. And so things are where they were before. And we'll hear more about this competition between two local businesses, with Outsourced continuing to keep that business having the lowest bid, as it had for 10 years, maybe 11 years or so. I'm trying to remember what Rusty Hall said in an interview with me about how long he has had that business. Well, this is David Tulis. We're here at 92.7 and 95.3 HD4. That's the digital channel, high definition channel. You can hear us on your new car. Just find that band on your late model radio, and there we are. You can hear us 60 miles out, about halfway to Nashville. And we do appreciate your tuning in. The name is David Tulis, and I argue for loving your neighbor and buying local, being loco-centric, expressing what is admittedly a kind of prejudice for the local over the national, even over the international. Though I say that even though I am in some ways a cosmopolite, reformed, trying to be a Nooga-centrist, where the whimsical concept is, well, somehow Chattanooga is the center of the universe because we live here. We are here, and it's not by accident, it's by providence. And so we're going to make the most of it and live our lives intentionally, with a purpose-driven living, right? That's the idea, I think, that is appropriate. Now, I want to look at the idea of liberty and having more liberty rather than less, thinking that liberty is always about grace, right? If you have liberty, you are free to do innocent and harmless things. You are free to go as you please, to invest and buy as you please, and have less and less interventions and claims upon that activity by the good people, or by people who have favor of the state and in some way can outbid you in business, outcompete you outdo you because of political connection. Now, the story about the staffing contract is interesting because the Lows are favored people in the sense that Donna has been involved in the mayor's women's council and has been involved in his campaign, and so perhaps in gratitude to her, Mayor Andy Burke has proposed that she get some of the business that now has been that has been for some time obtained by in the bidding process outsourced staffing. So there it seems to me, looking at things from a distance, that there is a kind of an intervention, a subvention on behalf of that new company, though the people involved in that company have been in the staffing field for some time and have a great deal of experience in that. There's the subvention. Again, subvention is from French subvention. Sub is under vent. Vent is wind or air, and we have similar words in English, right? Open the vent, which means let the air in. In your heater in your car this morning, as you came into the office, you had to turn the vent open and turn the heat on so the wind could come out. So a subvention is wind underneath something, a favor for something, lifting it up that might not otherwise come up. You have a subvention, a subsidy, a favor, a permit or license. We don't have a free market today in Hamilton County and Chattanooga because we have a licensing economy. We have a permission economy, one that already has, by the very nature of that concept, the very nature of state ownership of business and state control of business, of fascism, effectively, you have a drag and a friction on the free market, and so it's very hard to get anything off the ground. It's very hard for people to have initiative and to have the freedom of mind and concept that's really required to launch new businesses. Though there's a story in the Times Free Press today about some young people who, 2 or 3 of them from another country, and we would call them minorities, have gotten strong support and applaud the business idea. That kind of work of Company Lab, which is a government-funded organization, even though the origins of its funding are questionable in free market perspective, still what it's trying to do is encourage people to step up and to lift off, right? To take off and to rise into the marketplace to provide a service or a good. Where does liberty come from? Liberty comes when there's less of that, right? There's less blockage, there's less favoritism, there are less politics. Is less politics. Well, there are less politics. Politics, of course, is just the word for the operation of laws and the disputing over who should control those laws and who should write them or rewrite them or cancel them or act beyond them, right? That's what politics is all about. And the less we have of that in Chattanooga and Hamilton County, I think the stronger our economy will be, the more attractive our location will be, our geography. And I think since we're here and we live in a municipal corporation with some satellite municipal corporations such as Red Bank, Saudi Daisy, and East Ridge, that we should think in terms of reducing the drag, reducing the friction in this marketplace, in this area, so that people will want to come here from a long way off, which means to say that we want to encourage immigration. We want people to hear about the River City, about the gig city, and we want them to think that, wow, if I could just go there, if I could flee Connecticut, if I could flee Detroit, if I could flee California, then I will be better off. My family will be better off. There's more Christianity in the South. There's more grace in the South. There's more lenity, more respect among people, less rudeness. There's more consideration. People drive more carefully. They're more lenient with others, and there's an exercise of grace even by the state. As I hear, then we will move to Chattanooga and Tennessee. Chattanooga having wonderful geographic elements in its nature and in its background, and there is a, you might say, a kind of tyranny of geography where geography controls what people do. And in fact, there's a book by Robert Kaplan that I'm almost finished with that talks about that very question in the geopolitical and historic sense, how geography and the shaping of continents directs how people and nations in their conflicts and in their dealings are affected by the nature of bodies of water and land and the laying out of land across bodies of water. and how that affects human culture and history. So we want to take advantage of that here in Chattanooga and recognize that we don't just live in a beautiful city here, but we want to be one where the city and the government and the politics, that is to say, the operation of law, the operation of compulsion, if you will, right? Politics is about compulsion. All politics is about who controls the whip and the pistol barrel. At whom is the barrel aimed, and upon whose back do the metal shards on the whip at the end of the whip tails hit? Right? How many strikes does anybody get for doing something wrong, not complying, not being part of the system, not being obedient and kowtowing it? Do they get one stripe or 40 minus 1, as they did in the scriptures? You have reports of beatings of that kind, and there's a limit, of course, in how many lashes you can get. It's never to the total humiliation of the victim of the lashing. It's always 40 minus 1, and because any more than that, there is a debasement that takes place that is not lawful. Well, this is David Tulis, and so the question is, how do we have more? You want to know where am I going to go with this digression about the operation of law, and I would want to. I think one way I think we can improve ourselves is to take ownership of our protections. That is to say, personally, you take ownership of your protections, and thereby, once you have that, especially if you go through a tribulation doing so, you will have something that you didn't have before, and that would be maybe a confidence in God's protection. And if you don't have God, if God hasn't shown himself to you and doesn't love you and you don't love him, then what you would have instead would be a self-confidence that comes after a man has been through tribulation with an encounter of a threat. Now, the threat I'm talking about is not private crime really so much as is what we could call public crimes, state crimes against the people, which is the standard of today, right? We have less and less private crime, and we have more and more state crime. Look at the police abuse videos on your morning feed, and they're simply astounding. The kinds of things that you can see of people being tased when their arms are behind their back. The video yesterday that apparently millions have already seen, and I just now saw it yesterday, of the 9-year-old or maybe an 8-year-old boy who's almost hogtied by an SRO, a school resource officer. He's handcuffed and he's wriggling in a chair, and he's complaining about how it hurts, and he's clearly in distress. Well, these kinds of things are the kind of crime I think that we need to stand against. You, my listener, and I, and we want to try to push back the temptation for men. Most of these are men that are doing that. Women tend not to do this, unless, of course, they're enwrapped in a uniform of some kind, and then they take on the role of the taskmaster in the state, the bean counter, and the handcuff putter on her. Men doing this, if we can find a way of reducing that and reducing the motivation for men to comply with that, to be agreeable to that. If you go to Nooganomics.com this morning, our chief sponsor, there's a story by a writer I greatly respect who has a book out called The Doctrine of the Lesser Magistrate, and it's an essay, just a brief essay, about the sack of Magdeburg in 1550. This is at the time of the Reformation. It's good to mention the Reformation, which is our theological heritage in Chattanooga area, and also our political heritage. We have the whole idea of democratic government comes, we could say, it comes from the Hebrew Republic, but it comes in fresh form, in more vigorous form, to us in history, a very recent history, just 500 years ago. This October, at the end of the month, the time marked when Martin Luther hammered his 95 Theses, asking questions about the Roman Catholic practice and hierarchy on the wall of the church in Wittenberg, university town in Germany. The story on Nooganomics.com is about Magdeburg, which had the living out of local economy where in the breasts and hearts of the governors of that city. Now, when the Roman Catholic Church decided finally to fight back, it was after Martin Luther had died in 1546, and the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, he imposed what's called the Augsburg Interim, which was an attempt to smash the Reformation, to smash the rediscovery of God's grace, right? The key doctrine is that only the Scripture is true, and God saves by grace alone, through faith alone, from sin, and brings eternal life to the individual. And also, of course, the argument goes on to cultures as a whole. And since the resurrection, as Christianity has continued to thrive despite some setbacks, there has been more and more liberty around the world, more and more prosperity, and just remarkable innovations in every field: technical, medical, scientific, moral, and legal. And these are continuing advances in what's called the theory of progress, right? It's not just a theory of progress, which Christianity alone has of all systems of thought and practice. It is an actual thing, and you just have to read the right history. Secular historians, I think, tend not to see progress as perhaps they should. Well, what happened in Magdeburg was that the pastors, the clergymen, issued a confession in defense of the pastors and other ministers of the Church of Magdeburg. It was on April the 13th, 1550, and that was 5 months after the confession was issued. Charles V marched on the city in Germany, and the people in the town burned everything outside the town and holed up inside. There was a battle of 13 months. 4,000 of Charles's men were killed, and nearly 500 people of Magdeburg before Charles withdrew. And the doctrine that they stood upon was that the lesser magistrate, people like Bill Knowles, right, people such as Jim Hammond, Hamilton County Sheriff, elected officials stand their ground. Now, I mentioned Bill Knowles because when in 2015 the federal government's weakest branch, that is to say the judiciary, issued an opinion, Obergefell versus Hodges, stating that no state had, or that the states before it, none of those states had authority to declare men able to marry women alone, right? Only men and women may marry. To forbid states from declaring that as true and legal. Well, Bill Knowles capitulated the day it happened. Well, he's not the only one, because everyone in Tennessee, from county clerks all the way up to the governor, and Bill Haslam, they all capitulated under a theory that's proposed by lawyers as true, right? Every lawyer, will uphold this theory, and that is the doctrine of judicial supremacy. Is there such a doctrine? Yes, it's there, but it's simply not true. And it's also anti-Christian. It's also anti-God to say that any opinion of men, especially when it's called an opinion, has the force of law, and is binding upon all, is simply ludicrous, and it requires of local officials, Bill Knowles, the one we wrote about, to say, the Constitution is still alive today, and I'm going to just check to see if it changed overnight, because the opinion of Obergefell has been handed down this morning. Let me just check. Well, no, words are still the same. We still have an amendment to our Constitution in Tennessee that says only a man and a woman only constitute a married couple and no other. That's still the law, and I took an oath to uphold that as the law, and I'm not giving in. That is what is required by your oath of office. Your oath, of course, made before God. One hand in the air, ordinarily, right, and the other hand on the Word of God, the 66 books of the Bible. And so here we have men violating their oaths of office, from Bill Haslam all the way down to the most important man for us. That would be Bill Knowles. Well, I would say probably the most important man for Hamilton County is Sheriff Jim Hammond. He's the most powerful man in every county. He is the man whose authority comes from the ground, the land, and the people, seeing that he is elected and that his standing is of ancient right in English common law. He has a common law title. Enough with the Herbert Slattery III's, enough with the Bill Haslams. Cannot we have a strong and vigorous defense of what is right and true here? Would that not give confidence to the people to say, wow, our magistrate defends us against the evil ones from afar, right? The Charles V's, the federal judiciaries, the federal presidents, of course, at that time it was President Obama, queer, if there ever was one, President Obama, wanting to overturn the Christian order. Now, the Christian order, I just put in here a footnote. is only partly reflected in the statutory nature of American marriage law. Marriage belongs to the individual, right? It's God's gift to man, man by man and woman by woman. It belongs to you. You have a common law right to marry. Why would any state presume to claim ownership and custody of marriage through its licensing procedures and claiming, in fact, that we are not in Tennessee a common law marriage state? Common law marriage is what belongs to you. You have a right to marry. Alabama still recognizes common law marriages, though Tennessee does not. It presumes to have taken ownership of that right, and in other words, deleted the right. And if you want to marry now in Tennessee, you have to go and ask the people who allow gay marriages to let you marry. So they are the authorities. They're going to give you permission. I think we've gone pretty far down if we accept that kind of skullduggery. David Tulis.
The Tennessee Valley's news talk leader, Nooga Radio, Digital FM 95.3 HD.